You ever wonder why the truth always comes dressed like a lunatic? Why the liars get the spotlight and the truth tellers get the straitjacket? It's funny, isn't it? How the world rewards those who deceive with smiles, applause, and influence, while those who try to wake you up are called paranoid, dramatic, or crazy. You've been fed stories, polished ones, rehearsed to perfection, sold to you in shiny packages. They tell you what's good, what's evil, who to trust, what to fear, and you bought it, didn't you? You bought it because it was comfortable, because it was easy, because it made the noise in your head quiet for a while. But deep down, you know something's off. You can feel it crawling under your skin. That sense that everything you've been told might be a carefully designed lie. They built this illusion so beautifully, didn't they? Like a painter who knows exactly where to add a shadow, where to draw your eyes, how to make you feel safe, even when the world beneath you is burning. They dressed it up in comfort, wrapped it in certainty, and called it truth. And you swallowed it, gladly, because it made life simpler. Because the illusion was easier to live within the ugly, unfiltered chaos of reality. They needed you calm, obedient, predictable, so they gave you distractions, screens, routines, 1,000 rules that made you feel like you were part of something structured, something stable. And all the while, they took what they needed: your time, your mind, your quiet submission. You think freedom means choosing between this or that, left or right, buy or don't buy, agree or disagree. But real freedom terrifies them. Real freedom means you start asking why. It means you stop believing what's handed to you in neat, smiling packages. The illusion isn't built to withstand questions. It's fragile, like glass. That's why they keep you entertained, confused, divided, scared. As long as you're reacting, you're not thinking. As long as you're fighting shadows, you'll never look at the hands casting them. The illusion works because it flatters you. It tells you that you're informed, moral good. It whispers that you already know enough, that there's no need to look deeper. They feed you lies dressed as virtue, and you defend them because they make you feel righteous. That's the trap. They don't need to control you with chains. They've given you comfort instead. You sit quietly in your cage, convinced you're free because you can decorate the walls. You were never meant to see beyond it. You were meant to stay content, docile, predictable. They built the illusion so carefully that even when cracks begin to form, you doubt your own eyes. You question your sanity before you question the structure. That's how deep it goes. It started the day you were born. Little by little, they shaped your mind. What to believe, what to fear, who to trust. They gave you heroes and villains, told you what success should look like, how happiness should feel, what kind of people are right. You were trained to play your part, to fit their mold. And every time you tried to step outside it, the world laughed, mocked, corrected you. You were herded back into the illusion, told that rebellion was dangerous, that questioning was foolish. They told you to be realistic, but realistic just means obedient in disguise. You've seen glimpses, haven't you? Little moments when something felt off, when you realized people don't really care about truth, only about validation. When you saw someone punished not for lying, but for exposing one. Those moments you felt the ground shift under you. That quiet whisper in your mind saying, something's wrong here. But you silenced it, didn't you? Because it's easier to stay asleep than to wake up in a burning room. Easier to pretend the fire isn't real if everyone else is still smiling. They fed on your silence. Every time you stayed quiet, every time you looked away, every time you told yourself, someone else will handle it, they grew stronger. Because silence is the currency of control. They don't fear your anger, they fear your awareness. They fear the day you stop reacting emotionally and start seeing logically. Because once you see the illusion for what it is, it loses its power. The curtain falls, the magician's trick collapses, and the audience stops clapping. You weren't meant to serve, but you've been serving all along. You've been the worker, the product, the experiment, the obedient participant in a play you didn't write. But here's the twisted brilliance. You think you chose this. You think your beliefs, your habits, your opinions are your own. But they're not. They were planted, nurtured, cultivated, and you watered them with your trust. You protected them like they were sacred. You built your identity around someone else's design. And now, even when you begin to suspect it, even when you start to see the cracks in the illusion, fear stops you. Fear of being alone, of being mocked, of losing everything that gave your life shape. But isn't that the funniest part? You're terrified of losing something that was never real. You're protecting a lie because you've lived with it so long that truth feels foreign. They knew that would happen. They counted on it. They didn't just build the illusion around you. They built it inside you. You think the walls are around you, but they're not. They're in your mind, your beliefs, your emotions. That's why breaking free hurts. It's not the world collapsing. It's you tearing down the walls they made you believe were part of who you are. You were never calm by nature. They taught you calmness to control your chaos. But that chaos, that spark of rebellion, that voice that whispers no, that's the only thing that was ever truly yours. That's what they fear most. They fooled you by using the simplest trick in the book. They made you feel guilty for questioning. They told you it was wrong to doubt, wrong to push back, wrong to think differently. They used morality as a leash and fear as a muzzle. They told you that being good means obeying, and being bad means resisting. They conditioned you to associate obedience with peace and rebellion with destruction. So you stopped fighting. You stopped asking. You stopped looking. You turned yourself into a spectator of your own life, applauding the same performance that keeps you chained. They don't need to force you anymore, because they've made you police yourself. Every time a thought rises that challenges the system, you kill it before it breathes. You laugh it off, call it paranoia, conspiracy, madness. Because they've taught you that anyone who questions must be insane. You defend the very system that exploits you, mock the people who try to wake you, and call it rationality. That's how deeply they've programmed you. You became their perfect creation, the prisoner who guards his own cell. The lies they feed you are wrapped in logic. They don't just lie. They explain their lies. They give you data, statistics, experts, credentials, and you swallow them without chewing because the truth doesn't come in suits and microphones. It comes in whispers and chaos. But chaos frightens you, doesn't it? They made sure of that. They made you believe that order equals safety, and that questioning order equals madness. So you cling to their structure, even when it bleeds you dry. You beg for clarity, and they hand you more illusions. You ask for meaning, and they sell you distractions. You think you're consuming information, but it's consuming you. They created a world where being busy is more respected than being awake. You work harder than ever, but not for yourself. You chase goals that aren't yours. You measure your worth by numbers on a screen, approval from strangers, fake smiles, and filtered lives. They tell you to be yourself, as long as yourself fits their template. They give you just enough freedom to believe you have it. That's the genius of control. Give people the illusion of choice, and they'll never notice the cage. You see it in how people react to truth. They don't want to hear it. Truth doesn't comfort, it cracks. It exposes, it hurts. Lies are warm, familiar, safe. Truth is the stranger knocking at your door at 3 a.m. Lies let you sleep. Truth keeps you awake. That's why they keep lying. Not because you can't handle the truth, but because you don't want to. They built a world where truth feels like an intruder and lies feel like home. And when someone dares to speak it, the crowd turns on them. That's part of the design. The system defends itself through its victims. The controlled defend their controllers. You don't need soldiers when the minds of the people do the work for you. That's why those who see are ridiculed, because the blind feel safer together. And deep down, you know that stepping out of that herd means isolation, judgment, pain. You've seen it happen. You've probably even helped enforce it once or twice, didn't you? Not out of malice, but out of fear. Because when someone starts tearing at the illusion, it threatens everyone's comfort. They told you, trust the process. But whose process is it? They told you. Everything happens for a reason. But whose reason are you living by? You keep waiting for things to make sense, for justice, for fairness. But this world was never built to be fair. It was built to be useful. Useful for the few, controlled for the many. They trained you to see corruption as politics, cruelty as discipline, and manipulation as marketing. You laugh at it when it's a joke online, but it's not funny when you realize it's your life being consumed quietly while you scroll through distractions. You've been told that one day it'll all make sense, that if you just keep playing by the rules, you'll win. But that day never comes, does it? Because the rules aren't made to let you win. They're made to keep you playing. You keep giving your time, your energy, your hope, and in return, they give you noise. enough to keep you busy, not enough to wake you up. The game doesn't end, it resets. Over and over, every generation born, thinking they'll be the one to change it. Yet every generation ends up repeating the same cycle. Distracted, obedient, numb. But you feel it now, don't you? That strange heaviness. That voice that says, something's wrong here. It's not paranoia. It's awareness, trying to break through the layers they've buried it under. You've been trained to doubt it, to silence it. But the more you ignore it, the louder it becomes. It's the part of you that still remembers what truth feels like. Raw, unpolished, dangerous. They can control your environment, your information, even your emotions. But they can't kill that spark completely. They can only bury it under guilt, shame, and fear. They convinced you that being numb is strength, that caring too much is weakness, that detachment is wisdom. They made you believe that survival means conformity, that blending in means success. But deep down, you know the truth. You're not supposed to blend in. You were never supposed to live half awake, following a script someone else wrote. You weren't meant to exist just to make others comfortable. You were meant to see, to question, to tear through the illusion and feel everything they told you to suppress. They lied when they told you that peace comes from silence. They trained you to believe that keeping quiet means you're strong, that walking away makes you wise, that not reacting makes you mature. But tell me, who benefits from your silence? Who profits when you swallow your words? Your anger, your truth. Because it's not you. You think silence keeps you safe, but all it does is keep you obedient. You weren't made to be quiet. You were made to question. And the moment you stop speaking, that's the moment you start disappearing. You can feel it, can't you? That tightness in your chest when something feels wrong, but you say nothing. That dull ache when you see the lies, but everyone else smiles like it's normal. You tell yourself it's not your place, that you should stay calm, that you shouldn't cause trouble. But deep down, you know the truth. The world doesn't change by those who stay calm. The world changes when someone finally snaps, when someone decides that silence is no longer an option. They call it rebellion, but it's really awakening. You've been told to wait for the right time, to wait for the perfect moment to speak, to act, to live. But the right time never comes, does it? Because waiting is another trick they play. They tell you patience is a virtue, but in their world, patience is control. They want you to wait until you forget what you were waiting for. They want your urgency to rot into comfort, your fire to fade into routine. Every time you tell yourself, not yet, they win. Because not yet eventually becomes never. You've seen how people react when someone finally tells the truth. They panic. They attack. They ridicule. Because truth disrupts the calm illusion they've built around themselves. You become the threat. Not because you're wrong, but because you remind them of everything they've tried to forget. And that's what they fear most, being reminded. They'd rather live in a cage they can predict than step into freedom they can't control. They'd rather stay numb than feel the chaos of being awake. They built a world where truth is optional, a world where lies are currency, and silence is the price of survival. People walk around smiling while their souls rot quietly underneath. They laugh at honesty, mock vulnerability, and worship comfort. Everyone's pretending, and they know it. But they keep pretending anyway, because the illusion feels safer than the mirror. And if you ever dare to stop pretending, they'll call you crazy. Because in a world full of masks, the face that dares to be real looks like madness. You've been made to believe that speaking truth means you'll lose everything. Your job, your friends, your place, your peace. And maybe you will. But what do you gain by staying silent? You keep the illusion sure, but lose your reflection. You keep your seat at the table, but forget your purpose for sitting there. You keep your comfort, but at the cost of your conviction. The truth doesn't cost much. It costs everything. But once you pay that price, you realize it was never a loss. It was liberation. They tell you to play nice, to keep your voice low, to agree even when you disagree, to nod and smile when something inside you is screaming, because they know that if enough people stop pretending, the whole structure collapses. That's why they sell you distraction. That's why they drown you in noise. Because they can't control the silence that comes from awakening. Not the silence of fear, but the silence before the storm. The kind that comes right before someone finally says, enough. It's strange, isn't it? The way they've twisted courage into foolishness. The way they've made speaking the truth seem reckless. They applaud the liars who keep things peaceful and punish the ones who dare to shatter the calm. They'll call you dramatic, negative, extreme, anything but right. Because if you're right, then they're exposed. And they can't handle exposure. They built their entire identity on the illusion of control. You don't just threaten their beliefs. You threaten their comfort, their ego, their false sense of order. You think the world will reward you for playing along. It won't. It never has. The people who changed things, they weren't comfortable, they weren't quiet, and they weren't liked. They were mocked, rejected, labeled insane. But in the end, the same world that hated them needed them. Because truth always outlives the lie. It might get buried for a while, drowned under ridicule and fear, but it never dies. It waits, it watches, and when the time comes, it burns through everything false until all that's left is what's real. Every lie you tolerate becomes a brick in your own prison. Every truth you ignore becomes a whisper in your own head. And one day, that whisper turns into a scream. You can't drown it forever. You can distract yourself, yes. Drown it in pleasure, bury it in work, numb it with screens. But when it's quiet, when no one's around, when it's just you and your thoughts, it starts to surface again. That unease, that feeling that something's off, that's truth trying to breathe again. So the question is, how long can you keep pretending? How long can you keep playing along before the mask fuses to your skin? Because once it does, you don't even remember who you were before the lies. You become the very thing you swore you'd never be. A puppet that smiles while the strings tighten around its neck. You laugh, you joke, you act fine. But deep down, you know it. You've been living a lie, and every time you stay quiet, you give that lie more power. They disguise manipulation as morality. That's the oldest trick in the book. They tell you what's right and wrong. Not because they care about right or wrong, but because they care about control. They wrap the chains in velvet, make the poison taste sweet, and call it virtue. They want you obedient, not awake. They want you ashamed of your instincts, doubtful of your own senses. Because once you start questioning what's real, you stop being a follower. And followers are what they need to keep the game going. You see it everywhere. Rules built not to protect you, but to confine you. They say, be good. But good according to whom? Their definition of good keeps you quiet, predictable, compliant. They tell you that obedience makes you holy, that submission makes you pure. They tell you that questioning is sin, that doubt is rebellion, that resistance is evil. But have you noticed how every evil act they describe just happens to be the one that threatens their power? Convenient, isn't it? They dress it up in language that sounds noble. They talk about peace, about harmony, about keeping order. But their peace depends on your silence. Their harmony depends on your chains. And their order, it's built on fear. The kind of fear that keeps people sitting still while they're burning inside. You start to wonder if what they call light is just another form of blindness. Because when you look too closely, you start seeing the cracks. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. They feed you this moral script, tell you how to act, how to speak, how to think. And you follow because that's what you were taught. To be good, to fit in, to be accepted. But you can't help but feel it, can you? That sick twist in your gut when you follow orders that go against your soul. That subtle shame that comes from living by someone else's truth. They say it's guilt, a sign you've done wrong. But no, that feeling isn't guilt. It's the death of authenticity. It's your real self screaming from under the weight of their expectations. They want you to believe that morality is simple, black and white, no questions allowed. But real morality isn't blind obedience. It's brutal honesty. It's choosing what's right even when it costs you comfort. And that's what they can't stand. Because people who think for themselves can't be controlled. They don't fit in their boxes. Don't kneel to their idols. Don't buy their guilt. And that's dangerous, because once one person breaks free, others start noticing the cracks in the wall too. It's a system built on guilt. They shame you into compliance, make you confess to crimes you didn't commit. You feel guilty for wanting more, for questioning, for existing outside the lines. They tell you humility means shrinking, that forgiveness means submission, that love means sacrifice. As long as the sacrifice is yours, they weaponize your goodness against you. The kinder you are, the easier you are to control. They make you doubt your own heart until you start policing yourself. They don't even have to watch you anymore. You do it for them. You start to realize their morality was never about good or evil. It was about convenience. It's moral if it benefits them. It's sinful if it threatens them. They rewrite the rules whenever it suits their agenda. And the best part, they make you thank them for it. They've mastered the art of grooming you into compliance. They've convinced you that suffering makes you noble, that silence makes you wise, that obedience makes you safe. And you eat it up because it's easier than thinking. Because thinking means facing the truth, that you've been living a lie dressed as virtue. They tell you to trust authority, to trust the system, to trust the process. But every time you do, you feel a little smaller. Every yes chips away at your integrity. Every men buries another piece of who you were. You look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back. You tell yourself you're just doing what's right. But deep down, you know you're just doing what's easy. Because real righteousness isn't comfortable. It's not about fitting in. It's about standing alone when everyone else bows. They built this world on the illusion of morality. They tell you to follow the rules, but they wrote them in disappearing ink. They tell you to serve the truth, but they decide what truth means. They keep you dancing on strings of guilt and fear, whispering that if you just keep obeying, one day you'll be free. But obedience doesn't lead to freedom. It leads to dependency. They've made you believe that questioning them is betrayal. But tell me, if your faith collapses the moment you ask, why? Was it ever faith at all? You've seen what happens when someone breaks the script. They're labeled defiant, dangerous, immoral. They become the villain, the heretic, the outcast. But isn't it strange how history always ends up celebrating the same people it once condemned? The ones who disobeyed, the ones who refused to accept the lie as law. The same system that burns them later builds monuments in their name. Because truth has a funny way of surviving. No matter how much they try to bury it under virtue, you can feel the weight of their lies pressing against your chest, can't you? That pressure to conform, to agree, to smile. You hear their voices in your head. Be good. Be patient. Be quiet. But good for who? Patient for what? Quiet for whose benefit? You know the answer. It's the same every time. The moment you stop letting them define morality, they lose control. Because morality without manipulation is freedom. And freedom. You ever get that feeling that someone's always watching? Not the paranoid kind, not the creepy kind. Just that quiet awareness that eyes are on you. Every move, every word, every choice. You start to act different, don't you? Stand a little straighter, speak a little sharper. It's strange, isn't it? How people behave better when they think they're being seen. They call it pressure, but it's not. It's accountability. It's that invisible reminder that someone's paying attention, even when you think you're alone. Because the truth is, when you believe no one's watching, that's when most people fall apart. That's when they lie, cheat, quit, hide. But when you know they're watching, really watching, something in you wakes up. something that refuses to break, because now you've got something to prove. Awareness shapes behavior. Funny thing, isn't it? People like to believe they're honest, disciplined, strong, but only when someone's looking. The second the lights go out, the masks fall off, and you see what they really are. Awareness, that feeling of being seen, it changes everything. It's like a mirror that never blinks. You start to adjust yourself, your tone, your habits, just because you know you're not invisible anymore. You stand taller. You think twice before you act. You clean up the mess you'd normally ignore. Because deep down, you know someone might be watching. And that awareness suddenly makes you better than you were a second ago. It's strange how fragile people's morality becomes when they think no one's watching. They cut corners, they lie to themselves, they whisper little excuses like it's harmless. But the truth is, awareness keeps people honest. It's not fear that fixes them, it's attention. When you feel eyes on you, when you sense the weight of being observed, you act differently. Not fake, focused. You start caring about the little details, about the image you project, about how your actions echo. Awareness forces you to confront yourself. Because it's hard to lie when you know someone might be catching every move. There's a reason cameras change people. The moment that red light turns on, people straighten up, they smile, they play the part. But when the lens turns away, most collapse back into chaos. Awareness shapes behavior because it drags the truth into the light. It's not about pretending. It's about realizing you can't hide forever. When someone's watching, even if it's just in your mind, you start becoming the version of yourself you wish others would see. You stop making excuses and start acting with intention. Awareness turns chaos into structure. It turns impulse into choice. People love to preach about being yourself, but most don't even know who that is. You only meet your real self when you realize you're being seen. When every flaw, every mistake, every word can be noticed, that's when your true instincts show. Do you crumble? Do you fake it? Or do you rise? That's the power of awareness. It pulls your character out from behind your comfort. You can tell a lot about someone by how they act when eyes are on them. But you can tell even more by how they act when those eyes vanish. The ones who stay consistent, who keep doing what's right even when no one's around. Those are the ones who've learned to carry awareness within themselves. See, awareness isn't just about others watching you. It's about you watching you. The world has taught people to behave only for applause, only for approval. But the strongest kind of awareness is internal. It's that silent voice inside that sees everything. Every lie, every hesitation, every missed opportunity. You can fool people, but you can't fool yourself. The mind keeps the receipts. And once you start listening to that inner observer, you stop needing anyone else's eyes to keep you straight. That's when awareness becomes power. Awareness makes people uncomfortable because it strips away their illusions. You can't play innocent under observation. You can't pretend you didn't know better. It corners you into truth. It forces you to ask, who am I when someone's watching? And even worse, who am I when they're not? The difference between those two answers tells you everything about a person. Most people only act right when they're being graded. The rare ones, they live like someone's watching all the time, even in the dark. That's integrity. That's strength. The awareness of being seen changes how you walk through the world. Suddenly, your words matter, your actions have weight, your decisions echo beyond you. You realize everything you do leaves a trail, even if nobody mentions it. And that realization, that someone somewhere might remember what you did, keeps you grounded. It keeps you human. Awareness reminds you that you're never completely invisible, that your choices shape not just your image, but your reality. It turns living into something deliberate, not accidental. The moment you forget you're being watched, by people, by time, by consequence, that's when you fall. That's when shortcuts start to look smart, lies start to sound harmless, and failure starts to feel normal. But when awareness is alive in you, every move becomes sharp, intentional. You start respecting your own standards again. You start caring about the person you're becoming, not just the person people see. Awareness doesn't cage you, it wakes you up. It shows you that you were never just acting for them. You were training for you. It's funny how the simple act of being aware can turn weakness into control, chaos into precision. People think awareness makes life harder, but it doesn't. It makes life clearer. You see the patterns, the temptations, the traps. You see yourself, and once you see yourself, you can't go back to pretending. That's the quiet curse of awareness. It changes you. You start to live like the world is a mirror, and every action you take reflects who you really are. Accountability awakens discipline. It's amazing how people claim they want to improve. But the moment someone holds up a mirror, they flinch. Everyone wants progress, but nobody wants to be seen falling. Accountability feels like judgment to the weak. But to the strong, it's oxygen. It's the thing that keeps you from drifting into the comfort of your own lies. When you know you'll have to answer for what you do. When you realize someone might call you out if you slip. Suddenly, you start caring about the little things. You start showing up on time. You start finishing what you start. You start building a version of yourself that can stand without excuses. Without accountability, people rot in their own potential. They get lazy, soft, full of good intentions but no execution. They talk a big game, but they never deliver because there's nothing pushing them to. No one to disappoint, no one to prove wrong. That's the thing about humans. They behave better when someone's watching. They rise higher when there's pressure, when there's risk. Accountability forces you to keep promises you would have otherwise broken. It's not punishment, it's structure. It's the thing that separates the ones who dream from the ones who do. Discipline isn't something you find. It's something you build, one uncomfortable choice at a time. And the foundation of that structure is accountability. You need that voice, external or internal. that asks, did you do what you said you would? Without it, discipline turns into theory. People love to say they're disciplined until the alarm rings at 5 a.m., until the plan gets hard, until nobody's watching. That's when accountability whispers, you said you would. And that whisper becomes louder than your excuses. The world tells you to be independent, to not need anyone. But even the strongest people answer to something. A goal, a standard, a promise. Accountability doesn't make you weak, it keeps you honest. Because left alone, the human mind is a professional negotiator. It bargains with comfort, with fear, with laziness. It says things like, I'll start tomorrow, or I've done enough. Accountability doesn't let that slide. It drags you out of bed, out of denial, out of the soft lie that discipline can exist without pressure. Most people run from accountability because they mistake it for control. They think it limits freedom. But it's the opposite. It gives direction to your freedom. Without it, freedom turns into chaos. A million choices, no consistency. Accountability focuses you. It sets boundaries between who you are and who you're pretending to be. It doesn't care about how you feel. It cares about what you said you'd do. That's the part that stings. It exposes your inconsistencies. It forces you to face the gap between your words and your actions. And for most people, that's unbearable. You ever notice how people talk about discipline like it's a talent? Like some people are just born with it? Nonsense. Discipline grows where accountability exists. You can't build muscle without resistance. And you can't build discipline without responsibility. Someone has to remind you when you're slipping, even if that someone is you. The best accountability isn't external. It's internal. It's that part of you that refuses to tolerate your own excuses. That voice that says, no, this isn't good enough, even when nobody else would notice. That's the real coach. The one you can't lie to. Accountability doesn't have to come from people. It can come from your vision, your purpose, your promise to yourself. Every time you break a promise, you weaken your own trust. You make your word worthless. But when you keep it, when you stay true to it no matter how small, you become solid. You stop needing validation because you know you're dependable. You know you can count on yourself. That's real discipline. Doing what needs to be done long after the feeling that started it is gone. And accountability keeps that fire lit when motivation dies out. Most people don't realize how close they are to greatness until accountability steps in. Because accountability doesn't care about your comfort zone. It doesn't let you take shortcuts. It demands consistency. And consistency is where transformation lives. You don't grow when things are easy. You grow when you're forced to keep going, even when you'd rather stop. Accountability doesn't make life easier. It makes it real. It strips away your excuses until all that's left is effort. And effort, repeated long enough, becomes discipline. Accountability makes you predictable in the best way. You become the kind of person people can trust, the kind of person who doesn't just talk, delivers. That's rare. In a world full of talkers, The disciplined ones stand out like fire in the dark. They don't brag. They don't explain. They just do. And everyone else wonders how. But it's simple. They've made themselves answerable. They've accepted the weight of expectation and turned it into power. They've learned that the moment you stop needing to be reminded, you've become unstoppable. Accountability awakens something deeper than motivation. It wakes the part of you that's tired of being average. The part that's done breaking promises. The part that knows talk is cheap and only action counts. Once you start living by that code, once you let accountability become your shadow, you stop fearing discipline. You start craving it. Because you realize that every bit of pressure, every ounce of responsibility, every standard that feels heavy now is the very thing keeping you from falling apart. Closed mouths kill purpose. That's the tragedy no one talks about. Not the failure, not the rejection, the silence. The quiet surrender that happens when someone has something burning inside them, but never lets it out. People think death comes in a moment, in one dramatic instant. But no, it's slower than that. It happens every time you swallow your words, every time you let fear win, every time you stay silent when something inside you screams to be heard. That's how purpose dies. Not with a bang, but with hesitation. It starts small. You tell yourself, not today. I'll say it when the time's right. You convince yourself the world isn't ready, that you're not ready. You dress it up as patience, as humility, but it's really fear wearing a mask. Fear that they'll laugh. Fear that you'll fail. Fear that you'll stand out and they'll tear you down. So you shut your mouth, nod, smile, and let another piece of yourself rot away in the dark. You tell yourself it's safer that way, and maybe it is, but safe isn't alive. Safe is slow poison for purpose. People are born with voices for a reason, not just to speak, but to create, to challenge, to express something real in a world built on pretending. But somewhere along the way, they learn it's easier to blend in than to be heard. Easier to agree than to argue. Easier to stay quiet than to risk being misunderstood. And so they trade their voice for comfort, their conviction for acceptance, and they wonder why they feel hollow. You can't fulfill purpose while playing invisible. You can't change anything while staying silent. Closed mouths don't just kill purpose. They kill connection. You can't inspire anyone by hiding what you believe in. You can't touch lives if you're afraid to speak truth. Every word you don't say, every story you bury, someone out there misses the chance to hear exactly what they needed. You think your silence keeps you safe, but it keeps others lost too. Purpose doesn't live in what you think. It lives in what you do, what you say, how you move. Silence might protect you from judgment, but it also locks away your potential. You ever see someone living loud, unapologetic, and think, I wish I could do that? That's the version of you your silence murdered. The bold one. The fearless one. The one who didn't need permission. They're still inside you, gasping for air, while you keep pretending it's not the right time. There is no right time. There never will be. Waiting for the perfect moment is just another form of hiding. The world doesn't need your perfection. It needs your truth. Raw, messy, unfiltered. Because that's where purpose breathes. People don't realize how expensive silence is. It costs you your confidence, your dreams, your destiny. You think you're buying peace, but what you're really buying is regret. Long-term, quiet, soul-crushing regret. One day, you'll look back and remember all the times you stayed silent when you should have spoken. All the chances you let slip away because you were afraid of the noise. And you'll understand that silence isn't golden. It's a cage, a beautiful, polished cage built from your own hesitation. The world doesn't reward the silent ones. It never has. It rewards those who dare to speak, even when their voice shakes. Those who stand up and say something real while everyone else hides behind politeness. That's where purpose comes alive. In defiance, in risk, in the rawness of being heard. You can have the best ideas, the biggest heart, the strongest will, but if you never open your mouth, none of it matters. No one will ever know who you are. And maybe that's the cruelest part. Being alive but never seen, capable but never known. Closed mouths don't protect dreams, they suffocate them. They bury them under layers of what, if ifs and almosts until you start believing you never had them in the first place. You forget the sound of your own voice. You forget the fire that once made you want to scream. And eventually, silence becomes your identity. You convince yourself you're calm, humble, patient. When really, you're just afraid. Fear disguised as maturity. Silence disguised as wisdom. But deep down, you know. You know what you should have said, what you should have done. What you should have fought for. You can lie to the world, but not to yourself. The truth is, your voice isn't just for you. It's for the people who can't find theirs yet. It's for the ones who need to see that courage exists, that it's possible to speak and survive. Every time you open your mouth and say something real, you give someone else permission to do the same. That's what purpose does. It multiplies. But it can't multiply if it's locked behind silence. You have to let it out, even when it's messy, even when it hurts, even when it scares you, especially when it scares you. Closed mouths kill purpose, because purpose demands expression. It doesn't live in thought. It lives in action. It doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in confrontation. And every second you choose silence, you're choosing safety over significance. That's how dreams die quietly, in people who had everything they needed, except the courage to open their mouths and use it. Truth demands a voice. That's the thing people forget. Everyone says they love the truth, but the moment it starts to burn, they hide. They want truth when it's clean, polite, wrapped up nicely in something they can digest. But truth isn't soft. It's jagged, sharp, and uncomfortable. It doesn't whisper, it screams, and it demands to be spoken. Not buried under fear or fake smiles. The truth doesn't die when people lie. It dies when people stay quiet. That's how corruption grows, how injustice breathes, how mediocrity survives. Not through lies, but through silence. Most people know the truth, They just don't have the guts to say it. They carry it around like a secret, tucked deep inside, afraid that if it ever gets out, it'll ruin everything. And maybe it will. Truth breaks things. Relationships, reputations, illusions. It tears down the pretty walls people spend years building. That's why they hate it. Because truth doesn't care about comfort. It doesn't care about how fragile your little world is. It only cares about being known. You can bury it, deny it, laugh at it, but it waits, patiently, because sooner or later, it finds a way to be heard. People think speaking the truth makes you strong. It doesn't. It makes you vulnerable. Because once it's out there, you can't take it back. You can't hide behind it or reshape it to fit what people want to hear. You stand exposed, raw, human. That's why truth demands a voice. It needs someone brave enough to carry it, even when it costs them everything. And it always costs something. Acceptance. Comfort, sometimes even peace. But what's the alternative? Living in a lie. Pretending just to keep things easy. That's not living. That's pretending to live. The truth has a funny way of haunting those who suppress it. You can lie to everyone else, and maybe even convince them, but you can't lie to yourself. That quiet unease you feel at night, that restless mind that won't shut off, it's truth knocking. It's the reminder that you've swallowed something you weren't meant to. Because truth isn't meant to be digested. It's meant to be released. The longer you hold it in, the more toxic it becomes. It starts eating you from the inside, piece by piece, until you become just another version of what you swore you'd never be: fake, hollow, compliant. You ever notice how people who speak the truth are always the villains at first? They're the crazy ones, the rebels, the ones who don't know their place, until time proves them right. And suddenly everyone forgets they were hated for it. That's the price of truth. You get crucified before you get crowned. People don't like being confronted with reality, especially when it shatters the lies they've made peace with. They'll call you arrogant, insensitive, even dangerous. But deep down, they know you're right. They just can't admit it. Not yet. Because admitting it means they'll have to change. The truth isn't just about facts. It's about integrity. About saying what needs to be said, even when your voice shakes, even when it turns people against you. It's not about being right. It's about being real. There's power in that kind of honesty. The kind that doesn't try to please anyone. It's dangerous because it exposes everything fake around it. And once truth shows up, lies start to rot. That's why people fight it so hard. They know once it's spoken, there's no going back to pretending. You can feel when truth wants out. It starts as a whisper in your chest, a knot in your stomach. The moment you hear something false, it reacts. That's your conscience begging you not to settle. But most people push it down. They choose silence because silence feels safer. They'd rather choke on the truth than speak it and face the storm. But the storm is where you grow. It's where you find out who you really are. Anyone can smile when everything's calm. But it takes something dark and fearless to speak truth into chaos. There's a reason the truth makes people uncomfortable. It exposes the lies they've built their identity around. It forces them to see what they've ignored. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending. That's why truth demands a voice. It's not content with being understood quietly. It wants to be declared, shouted, lived. It doesn't care who believes it or who gets hurt by it. It only cares that it's free. People spend their lives searching for meaning, for clarity, for purpose, and it's right there in truth. But truth without voice is wasted. It's like fire trapped in glass. Beautiful, but useless. To live with truth means to speak it, even when your throat burns, even when you stand alone. Because the truth isn't meant to be comfortable. It's meant to wake you up. It's meant to strip away every layer of illusion until all that's left is what's real. And what's real doesn't need permission to be spoken. Silence feeds regret. It doesn't come all at once, no. It creeps in slow, quiet, disguised as peace. You tell yourself it's better not to speak, better not to act, better not to cause waves. You call it maturity, patience, control. You convince yourself you're doing the right thing by holding back. But deep down, you feel it. The itch of words unsaid. The weight of moments you didn't take. Silence feels safe in the moment, but it ages like poison. It seeps into your bones until one day you realize you've built a life full of things you should have done, but never did.